one ring to rule them all and one ring to bind them. If you're familiar with this phrase, then you definitely are in for a royal treat. I'm Tushar Joshi at India Today. And I wouldn't be surprised if you do get attached to the work that you're putting out there, and if somebody's like tripping around it, or you're like, don't go too close, or don't handle it like that. You know, I'm guessing it just comes with the job. If I have to ask you a fun question in terms of if there's one set piece or something that you would like to take back home and safeguard it and put it in a vault back home from the new season, what would it be?
Oh gosh, there's lots of things. Probably the rings, I think. I think they're particularly beautiful. The shrine, the main piece of dressing in the shrine is pretty beautiful as well. I think there's lots of things.
She's like, I want all of it.
Yeah, I do, because it's. I think we were really lucky. We've said this before, that you can be so creative and you can just let your creativity. You know, there's no boundaries, are there really? And Christian has just been so amazing, because he's sort of takes on board, you know, some of the ideas that we've brought to him. Some of them are crazy and we don't do them, and other things we run with and it works really well, which is good. But I think for me, when I first started out, it was always difficult, because when the crew arrives, they tend to sort of slightly trash the set, but not trash it, but it's just you've got suddenly lots of people over it, and we always have the privilege of seeing a set empty, don't we?
Yeah.
And lit and dressed before anybody else gets there, and so I think we're really privileged.
Absolutely.
Christian, what's your pick?
It's an impossible question, completely impossible question, but I guess that I think there's in Casa Doom there's a new throne share, and I think there's some. I mean, I don't know. It wouldn't fit in my house at all, but I think it could be fun to have it in the garden.
Cool. Yeah, that's
Of
cool.
like it's certainly a power chair that it would be fun to have. But I think No, Tina is right. The rings, we spend a lot of effort on the rings. In season 1, we see 3 rings, and so Tina and I spend a lot of time working mostly in-house, almost like entirely in-house, designing and making and manufacturing rings.
This is super exciting. For a simple reason that so much of the series is all about the visual excitement. It's so much about sort of being drawn into the place, in those battle scenes, in those scenes in the courts, in every possible way. And costume plays such an important part in the series. You know, you can't have the drama scenes, the action scenes without the costume. I want to speak to you a bit about when this came to you, when the project came to you. What was the first thing that went in your mind, and what was that conversation like, where you were like, oh my God, I'm getting to do this?
Yes, it was really, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? That was my question. So the first thing I had to do, that was the end of season 1, and I had to fly to New Zealand, and my first concern was to get up to speed on my Tolkien knowledge. So reading the books and getting deep into the culture. And then understanding that there was already a language in place. There were already cultures and civilizations, and I had to continue with that language. And even now in season 2, we had to continue with that. There was a previous designer, the talented Kate Hawley, who designed all the different groups of people, and we wanted to preserve that and just add instead of removing and redoing. So that was my initial reaction. Total panic, total feeling of inadequacy, and then the desire to improve, to learn, to understand, in order to be able to produce all the beautiful things that you just saw during the visit to my workshop.
But what's the one thing that's been the most exciting in terms of costume for you this particular season?
Well, I'm trying to go back and to think of what has really been exciting, creating maybe new cultures, giving the look to new civilizations. That has been a major challenge, and also very, very exciting. And that is one part, of course, when the script and the showrunners and the producers come to you with a new world. Of course, it's a huge responsibility, but also building upon what was already done in season 1 by Kate Hawley, and building on top of that, creating new costumes, and trying to make it even more interesting. That has been also a great challenge.
How does one sort of rein in, and how do you sort of decide how much do you go all out and how much do you not? Because VFX
Yes.
get you in that.
Yes, because there is a certain amount of restraint, I think, in what we do that actually helps to ground us. Because obviously Tolkien's world is fantasy. It's the definition of fantasy, right? It's the foundation that every other fantasy, product is kind of built upon, And the fact that it's such a fantastical world is a danger, actually, because if it's too kind of out there and too strange, people can't relate to it. And if you look at the way Tolkien wrote, he actually rooted everything in reality. Before he wrote, he would draw a map. He actually had a quote that said, before writing something like this, it's best to start with a map. Because he wanted to have enough foundation that when people come to this fantastical world with him, that they would have a feeling of reality. When you read Tolkien, it actually feels like you're reading history, right? It feels like you're reading another version of our history that is just as real as anything that we know is actually transpired, So we've tried to approach our work in the same way, in the same way that Tolkien made up languages before he wrote the dialogue, Right. We have tried to come back to the foundation of everything and say, if I'm going to show the audience a gigantic waterfall, or the streets of Numenor, right? I'm showing them something that just doesn't exist, and it's very complicated. I want them to look at that and say, like, oh wow, they're really there. Or if they're a film, if they're a technical person, they might think, like, what location did they find to shoot that? And that's what we want. We want it to feel like it's so rooted in reality that they can kind of relax and embrace the elements that are fantastical,
You mentioned Numenor, and that's interesting because it was the first time that we actually got to see what Numenor looks like. If you've seen all of the older works, there are bits and glimpses and parts and pieces of it. But when you see it in its full scale, what was your most fun part of VFX for first season?
I have to say, when you talk about Numenor, that was one of those things that was an honor, actually, because we've seen glimpses of Numenor with the Argonath, the big statues that they sail past. So we've seen that before, but actually going there, not just seeing what those people did in Middle-earth, but going to their island. It was just such a huge, exciting honor to do. But it was also kind of scary because, when you start to build up a whole world from scratch, the danger is that it becomes kind of small. You start to feel like you're making a theme park. And we didn't want it to be that. We want it to be like, no, you're seeing a small slice of an incredibly large world, and give the sense to the audience that they're only seeing a glimpse. You're only seeing like little bits, but this world extends. If you decided to walk down that alleyway, there's a whole adventure down there. And if down this street, there's a whole adventure down there. And that's the feeling I always got from Tolkien when I was reading it, is that there's a dark cavern over there. And if I went down there, there's a whole other adventure I would have over there. We're trying to give that sense that you're only seeing a small part. And so in making Numenor, obviously we're only making one city. In Numenor to show you, and then in that city you're only seeing a few streets. So when we designed that, we actually designed the street layout for the entire city. We designed viaducts that carry water throughout the city and boats throughout the city. We really put a lot of work into designing all of these things that you only glimpse. So that whenever you look there, the complexity is there. That there's a sense that this whole area has thought behind it. For example, with Numenor, it's not just buildings scattered randomly. It's there's a shipyard over here, and it's not part of the story. It's not part of the script, but we designed it. We designed it so that you can look over there and see that something different is going over there. It feels a little more industrial, and over here there's kind of a market, and like along this wall of cliffs, there's construction that seems older. And then we've built on top of that with newer construction, and that older construction is a little more elvish influenced, and the newer stuff is a little more human influenced. So we're working the story into those visuals at every step and trying to do it in a way that it takes it away from anything cookie cutter, anything that's just a stamp, anything that looks like a computer could have just put it there for us. We're trying to always move away from that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of fun.
It must be, I'm sure. When this role came to you, right, and when you deep dive into the world of Tolkien and his magical, fantastical world, there's so much that you can explore. What was the one thing that was most exciting about this part?
I have to say I'd never worked with prosthetics before, or worn a beard so big or a wig so fuzzy. So getting to dive into that world, that technical side of things was exciting to me, and just to see if you can act with all of this stuff on your face and see if you can portray it out and be read, and luckily the Jane O'Kane, the makeup designer, was just phenomenal. We did lots of different versions of Durin, and I think she absolutely nailed it with him, and allowed me as an actor to be expressive as well, and not hide behind too much stuff. It's all about the eyes and the nose.
The nose, hard to miss.
Yeah, it's very, very, yeah.
Sophia, he spoke about the fact that obviously prosthetics and makeup does take a lot of time. You're sitting in that chair for really long hours. But when you see that character come to life, when you're watching those scenes, all that hard work pays off. All those hours of sitting down does pay off. Speak to me a bit about the reactions that you've got to your character from season 1, because I know how excited you were. You've chronicled each and every part of that journey on your Instagram page.
Yeah, very much so. Look, it was a completely new character. In the world of Tolkien, we've not seen a female dwarf to this scale before. And so it felt like, whilst we had the incredible infrastructure of Tolkien and everything that he gives us, we were building something from the ground up. And so with that comes a huge amount of excitement, and we were so lucky to have so much time with Jane O'Kane and the amazing team. The wonderful producers were so involved. Lindsay Webber, I remember having loads of conversations with on how do we begin Disa? How do we birth this amazing moment visually? And after much deliberation, the Disa that we see was born. And I think then it was so much time before we got to put her out into the world. And of course, I believe in her. It feels like all my amazing friends that are part of this production believe in her, but it was definitely a little bit anxiety-driven to see, is the world going to love her as much as I do? Is the world going to embrace her and understand her as much as I do? And I'll never forget when the first image of Disa went out, and the reaction across the board was just so exciting. And I remember all the kind of comments and feedback listed everything that we wanted her to be, and so it just felt like we'd built something that everyone embraced so beautifully. There she was, and she's incredible, and I feel she feels really unique and iconic, and I was thrilled. I was really, really happy.
I have to ask you that, we also watched Numenor through your eyes. I mean, for me, watching Numenor and that introduction to Numenor was outstanding, because I have watched Numenor parts and pieces, read about it a bit, but we never saw it in its grandeur. Was that also an epic moment for you? Can you speak to me a bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've got these incredible artisans who are part of our crew who build these sets, build these props, costumes, and you really are immersed. So you get to genuinely have the experience. And I remember my first day being on the set of Numenor and just being like, wow, this is epic, this is massive. So, the reaction that we have, I'm sure audiences, when they see it on screen, are very much transported as well.
Yeah, and here with season 2, we've got some of the old Numenorian locations and new ones again. So coming back to the UK and the production team here started to be as inventive as they were in New Zealand. It's a great privilege to be on the Numenor set, always.
Yeah, and also Elendil had this quirky, sort of eerie, mystical thing going on about him, because we didn't know what's going on in his mind, especially towards the last few episodes. It sort of gives you a glimpse of what is going on beyond what you get to see. I mean, I think that's a common thread for a lot of characters through the season, is that you get to interpret it your way, and then that's where the magic of the season 2 sort of begins in. So to quickly ask you, where is Elendil going and where are we going to see him in? I know you can't say much.
Yes. Well, I think what's interesting is what we set up, and what I think they set up so well from the Numenor perspective in season 1 was this tension between the personal and the political, particularly in Elendil's family. And I think it's darker this season. There's more pressure. People are under more stress. The political situation is harder. So again, it's almost like he's a piece of elastic being stretched morally and emotionally by what he's going through, and that's been joyful to play.
Right, and also the action scenes, the battle sequences, like on a day like this, right? I mean, action and acting it's easy for us to watch it on screen, but it's hours and hours of getting in costume, hair, makeup, doing the scenes, and then perhaps wanting to do it again. What is your takeaway? What has been your takeaway of doing the show? Because it must have sort of really given you a different perspective towards this art of the craft you love.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what's always interesting when you have a series and you have a first season, you're really introducing people or reintroducing characters, worlds, people who are familiar with Tolkien. And so when you do a second season, now you're invested. You know these characters, you're invested in their fate and the outcome of these stories. And so of course we've got to deliver it even bigger, so it's even more battles, even more sort of spectacular set pieces, new parts of the world, new characters. So you've got to really up your game, which I think, we're doing this season for sure.
And you do have a connect back home. I remember speaking to you about that when I met you in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the fans who followed that work of you have also jumped on board for the
Yes.
series and shown you love. What message do you have for fans back home in India?
Oh, well, it was just such a privilege to work there over an 18-month period, obviously with Bachchan and Amir Khan, but just to be welcomed into that Bollywood world and was such a privilege. So I'm delighted if some people have moved from Tugs of Hindustan to the Rings of Power. My character is so much nicer in this in this series than I was in Tugs. But I'm delighted that the Indian fans are coming along for the ride.
And Cynthia, I mean, you're looking gorgeous right now, right from head to toe. I'm asking
Long time in makeup. I mean, hours.
Hours.
She sits in a chair for 5 minutes.
Oh wow! But
That's all.
hypothetically, if you were living in a parallel universe and you could take one thing from the set and keep it with you perpetually forever in time, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I've got some epic costumes. I had beautiful costumes. It's basically like couture. And this is, as I told someone, this is my humble garment. So this is not even the most spectacular of what I get to wear in season 2. So even more beautiful garments. And for other characters as well, all of the level of detail and care and thought. We've got an incredible costume team. It really does take an army of artisans to make all this stuff, so it's an honor and a privilege. But what would I take? I mean, I would take it all, darling. I would take it all.
I'm definitely I'd love to take this ring, which is, we built up some backstory for Elendil with his being a widower, but this is a ring that we have talked about his now dead wife had given him, which in Elvish says safe return, and it's a very beautiful thing to have as that memory all the way through.
Oh wow, that's also a very personal sort of connect with that ring. And finally, if you had to describe the second season in one word, I know it's very difficult, but what would it be?
That's a very
You
good
can't
question.
put it into one word.
We're going to have one each, and that will give us 2.
Yeah, that works.
Right?
That works.
Darkness. Or as Milton said, darkness visible.
That's 2 words.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
if I can use more than one word, darkness and light. There is still that little ray of light that we're all sort of working our way towards. So,
Yeah, hope. Yeah.
Wow, I love this message of darkness and hope put together. Thank you so much for speaking to India Today. Can't wait to watch the second season.
Thank you so much.
Tristan and Leon, welcome to India Today. I have to say this, I watched the first season, right? And I'm a huge Tolkien fan, and I've watched all the movies and I've read the books. These characters that we get to watch in the series, we invest so much into them and in their stories, whether it's the politics of it, whether it's a father-son relationship, whether it's the hunger to know what's beyond than what meets the eye. Speak to me a bit about how you guys sort of cracked that father-son relationship and that dynamic right at the onset of season 1.
I think like any relationship, they're complex. There's lots of room for nuance in any relationship between father and son. I think everybody knows each person knows how to wind the other up, and also as well what they need, to look after them, I guess, and safeguard them without the other person knowing that sometimes. So I think that's something that can be universal, and that's something that we tapped into.
Wow. Leon, your thoughts on this?
One of our first meetings, I almost got us run over by a train. I was driving Tristan home from
Icebreaker.
An appointment we had together, and I was like, "I'll give you a lift. We can catch up." And then I got us stuck on the train tracks as the barriers came down.
Wow.
And he was sort of going, "Are we going to get off the train tracks?" And I was like, "Yeah, as soon as we can." And so that definitely was foundational in the relationship for me. Kevin idolizes this guy. He's always thinking, "How will I ever reach the standard he's set?"
Yeah.
And so to go, if my base standard is I almost kill us, how do I come back from that point? That was always a useful kind of like marker to have in the ground.
Right. What has been your favorite moment from the first season, just as a fan of the series?
Well, we only get to see sort of our slice of the show.
Okay.
So all of the worlds that I hadn't experienced before, that was the stuff that blew my mind. I mean, the battle stuff that runs through 6 and 7, I'd heard about it. I thought I knew what it was going to look like, and I had no idea. It was such a pleasure to experience it.
Wow. And your equation with the Queen, we really don't know where it's going.
Yes.
Because there's this parallel thread of almost grey sort of space that your character gets into.
Yes.
How does that play out in the second season?
You're going to see development of that. Obviously, you've got an introduction to that. And now you're going to see, I guess you're going to see the seasoning, I guess, on the cooked meat out of the oven, so to speak. I'm going off on a tangent here, but you'll see the relationship develop. I guess you'll just have to watch it and follow it.
Yeah. I also like the fact that I know you can't give away anything at all from the plot points, or I'm not even going there. But just for those who have watched the first season and who are so hungry for what to expect from the trajectories of your characters and where they lead, I've spoken to a lot of people today, and I keep hearing words like dark and grey and danger. But there's also hope and light and things and reasons to celebrate, right? What has been your take on whatever you've filmed so far, or the season 2, what to expect?
Well, I'll tell you what, one for Numenor is that we have been touted as this great thalassocracy, this kingdom of the seas. And you see us come back with our tails between our legs after losing the war in Middle-earth. And not only that, but our Queen Regent has lost her sight. So all of a sudden, everything that you thought, your reputation from behind your own walls, counts for nothing on the outside. And the realization is kicking in that I guess Numenorian society has become quite sclerotic, and rot has set in there. And I think it needs, I guess, my character, Farazan, thinks it needs a facelift.
Wow.
So I think that's where we'll be going, and there'll be a reckoning, I think.
That's an interesting take on what to expect. Perhaps a teaser and a hint of where the story might go. He mentioned Numenor, and for me, just to watch Numenor and the splendor and grandeur of it was just exciting, because we really get to see the grandeur of it all, and we haven't seen that before. I perhaps have read about it or seen bits and parts, but over here we get to see Numenor as it. What was your reaction when you saw that liven up on the screen?
Oh, it's so special. It was special just to work in those sets.
Yes.
They were extraordinary, the detail that you were experiencing. And it was, we're building blocks upon blocks of the city. We were living inside the thing. I can say that there is more to come. I've seen some stuff this year that is mind-blowing.
And having to go back to the real world, it's slightly anticlimactic when you go around Numenor, the town that was built and stuff, Armenelos, and it was quite something.
Yeah, brace yourself and good stuff. We'll go with that for now.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking to India today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.